So the final day of the Qatar Goodwood Festival is the Saturday, 31st of July, another fantastic day, probably the best in terms of the punting race, which is the Stewards Cup, which we'll come to, but the Lily Langtry for fillies and mares over 1 mile, 6 furlongs. Again, because the quality of fillies and mares is so good this year, I think this race has got a lot of quality to it. There'll be fillies that have been running at Royal Ascot coming in here. There's plenty to look around, lot of horses that are progressing quite steadily. Now, Tom, I know because I've already seen, but I really can't see the angle into Albaflora. I was so keen on her coming into Ascot. I thought she had absolutely everything lined up from her. She had her ground conditions, she had the track form. What went wrong, and why do you think that she's going to reappear even better in the Lily Langtry?
What went well? I don't think anything went wrong necessarily, other than the fact that the Hardwick was a Group 1 race, in my opinion. Obviously, it's a Group 2, but to me, there were Group 1 horses in there. Wonderful Tonight won it. We see her in the King George on Saturday. And then who was back in the field? Hockham. Broome finished second. I thought it was a good race for the grade. And Albaflora was tackling the boys. I thought she ran okay. I'm willing to put a line through it and give her another chance. Prior to that, she also ran a very good race at the Coronation Cup at Epsom, a Group 1, got beat by Al Arzi and Pile Driver, who finished second and first, the other way around. Two very good horses again. So I think she's been in at the deep end the last twice. I was so impressed with her at Ascot on her reappearance when she bolted up. Now, I know it was a listed race, but I think I tweeted directly after that race that this will be the horse to take Ross Orion to the top in Group 1 level. I think she's got a great chance in the Lily Langtry, providing there's a lot of rain. She needs testing ground. If it gets on the soft side, I'll be all over Albaflora. I don't think it's the best race. It's got plenty of strength and depth, but I don't think there's too many proper Group 1 horses in the field. Obviously, it's a Group 2, but Albaflora is a Group 1 horse. I thought Valia was intriguing, so is Search for a Song for two very good trainers in Alan de Roy de Pre and Dermot Weld. But I really like Albaflora, and if the ground gets testing, I think she could get back to winning ways.
Well, it's an interesting point to make, especially the fact that the race set in the Hardwick, there was some classy animals in there. I remember Ross Orion coming off at Ascot saying, if I've ever sat on a Group 1, if I've ever felt what a Group 1 horse feels like, it's this. So that's that you get a lot of confidence out of those comments, and he's been sitting on some pretty smart horses. Be interesting to see if he's back on board her, Albaflora, for Rafe Beckett. She's obviously been partnered by James Doyle, Frankie. She's had lots of different partners, so it'd be curious to see what happens with that. I like a filly that will come into this race extremely unexposed. She is unbeaten so far. She's 2 from 2. That's a Camelot filly called Yes Yes, another one of Rafe Beckett's. Rob Hornby has been on her both times now. Novice races she's been running, and I don't believe she'll win this race. I think that she could be an each way price, but I think she's a filly going the right way. They've obviously spent a lot of time with her. She is another filly that will probably want some give in the ground. She's learning all the time. I really like the way that Rob educated her into her race at Lingfield last time. This is a big step up in grade. But what she did, beating Eileen Dover first time out in a race where there was a lot of horses with more experience than her, I thought was really eye-catching. So I'd like to see how she fares in this race, and kind of probably at the back end of the season as well when she gets her softer ground. Now we'll end with the Stewards Cup, which is the biggest and the best betting race of the year. And I say that because I backed Summerhand last year and I was absolutely delighted with myself. I don't know how I managed to do that or find that, because it was a huge prize. But we were talking earlier about sprinters, Tom, that they race against each other week after week, don't they? And you find them, they kind of thrown up, you throw them all up, and we'll see what happens again against sort of the same opposition. It's a race that is always you always have to look at how the draw plays out. So we don't know what the draws is at this time. But you've also, what I liked about Summerhand winning last year was that he had a lot of weight to give away. And you always worry about these big handicaps. But what Rohan did and what horses have been doing, sprinters have been doing in these big field handicaps now, is showing that doesn't really need to matter so much. So you've got classy animals contesting in this kind of race, and it's a fascinating. It will be probably another fascinating race. What are your thoughts going into it?
Well, there are 115 horses currently declared or currently entered, and we don't know the draw and we don't know the ground. So my thoughts are, you got to play the waiting game a little bit. However, there is a horse in here that I have actually fancied for a big handicap all season. I put him up for a couple of races that he didn't make the cut, didn't make the final field in, and that's Miras for trainer Mark Johnson again at Goodwood. I think he's a plot horse. I'm pretty sure Mark Johnson has targeted him at this race after bypassing a couple of the other sprint handicaps. He's only had 2 runs this season after a gelding operation and wind surgery over the winter. 2 runs, now is primed, 3rd off a layoff. It's a classic US angle that. I know obviously it's not a US race or a US horse, but 3rd run off the layoff is what they tend to say stateside, that the horse is going to be primed. He hasn't necessarily shown that good a form this year. But this is a Mark Johnson trained horses. And as I mentioned earlier on, these horses can put in a shocker and then bounce right back. But Russ actually ran in the Stewards Cup last year as a 3-year-old, which just shows how highly the Mark Johnson team regard him. It's not an easy race for a 3-year-old to win. And he was sent off at 11-2. And that just shows that they really thought Miras had a proper chance. He was running off a mark of 103. And he ran a really good race, finished 6th. He was still in front with a furlong to go after leading the far side group, which wasn't where you wanted to be. He finished 2nd in that group behind Kimmy 5, who actually finished 2nd to Summergand. I thought now that he's now 4-year-old, he's a burly sort, he's going to be hardened. I think this day, Stewards Cup day, will be the day for Miras, hoping he gets a high draw, not drawn over the far side. He races off £3 lower technically than last year, although he's £3 wrong at the weights because the weights were obviously made in advance and he's run twice since. So he's currently rated 97, but he's running off a mark of 100. Providing he gets a good draw, he's a massive price. I think Miras is going to run a really big race, especially if he can get a lead as well. Last year, he was forced to do all the donkey work out in front. It's really hard to win these sprint handicaps from the front, getting no cover, expending your energy early and not having enough left at the finish. If Miras can get a little bit of a lead, still sitting prominently, but a little bit of a lead, I think he's going to be a real big threat in this race.
Yeah, interesting to talk about the draw. I can't pains to talk about it. It is so important. Last year, Miraz came out of stall 4. Summergand came out of stall 17. It can really win or lose this kind of race. So we'll have to wait and see what his fate will be. But it's fascinating, as you say, that they've sort of plotted and waited and running him at a track like Hamilton, keeping him quite under the radar. And as you say, his mark is such that it's quite interesting. He's currently 18-1 as we speak, but as we get close to the time, things can change. And probably one that wouldn't want too much rain either. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's very fair to say. 18-1 to me is an attractive price. Even if he drifts, I wouldn't be put off him. These Mark Johnson trained horses don't need to be 5-1 to win. 5-1 favourite in a sprint handicap. They can be 33-1. I wouldn't be persuaded either way if he was backed or drifted to jump ship. I think he's a good bet in the race, providing he draws high. He's definitely going to get in the race at least because he's number 13 in the entry list. So that's one tick anyway.
Well, one of the horse that I like, I'm not necessarily sure will get in, he's number 34 at the moment, is Great Ambassador for Ed Walker. This is a really interesting horse. I actually had him as one of my horses to follow when he was with Rafe Beckett last year as a 3-year-old. And he was sold to the Ed Walker yard, and they brought him back from a 7-furlong trip that they were trying him out in his last with his last connections to a 6-furlong sprinter, and he bolted up at Kempton first time out, like really eye-catchingly. It was super impressive what he did off the back of a bit of a break. He was then 3rd at Newmarket in a good handicap behind Chill. He might have been slightly disappointing that day. I think he was probably a little bit too keen. They were trying the tactics they adopted at Kempton the time before, was hold up again. It was a small trappy run affair. I think it'd be really interesting to see what he'll be like in a really big field handicap. So I'm curious to see how Great Ambassador gets on, if he can get in. Again, another horse of the Ed Walker team, who I'm obviously quite fond of, seem to be picking him left, right and centre. But they have been in good form, and this is just quite a curious horse. I really like what they've done with him. So Goodwood is going to be fast and furious. There's plenty of action. It will be interesting to see how much rain they get. Looking at it at the moment, Tom, there's thunderstorms coming left, right and centre. They probably have been watering a little bit anyway because it's been so dry. We know the Mark Johnson team like it quite quick, and Let's hope it's just a level playing field at least, and we can get some really good, fair action.
Yeah, definitely. You don't like to see the rain. Obviously, we've had a good couple of weeks of nice weather. I'm heading to Sandown on Saturday. We're recording this day in advance, and it's looking to be thunderstorm. So I'm not looking forward to that. Hopefully, that Goodwood misses it as well for the ground. We don't want to see a bog out there, albeit for some of the runners I might for betting purposes. But look, hopefully it's a level player field and every horse has their chance.
Brilliant. Well, we look forward to catching up with you again soon, Tom, off the back of a lot of successes for both you and I. I can't remember there were many that we agreed on, but, you know, hopefully we'll net out all right. Thank you so much, and best of luck for the week.
Thank you very much.